I have been telling stories since I can remember, but I became a fiction writer rather late, when I was almost 40. Before, I was too busy raising a family and working for a living. Women of my generation in Chile were not supposed to be creative or successful. That was a man's destiny. We were supposed to behave nicely, be fervent Catholics, reliable mothers, faithful wives, of course, and good citizens. No wonder I grew up rebellious and defiant. At 15, I acted like an angry brat, but inside, I was scared and vulnerable, and I longed for romantic love, like most girls in the 50s. Oh my God, the 50s, it sounds like the pyramids. That explains why I fell in love with the first young man who looked at me twice. I clung to him like a crab and married him at 19. We had 2 wonderful kids, Paula and Nicolás, and for a while everything seemed fine. I worked as a journalist in a feminine magazine and TV programs. I also wrote some humorous columns for newspapers and magazines. Let me tell you, I'm very funny in Spanish. I was a lousy journalist. I could never be objective. I lied most of the time. And if I didn't have a story, I made it up. Does it sound familiar? Yeah. Well, at least I was never caught. I should have been a fiction writer from the very beginning, but I didn't even know that women could be writers. The writers I read were all male. I had heard of some female authors, mostly British spinsters. They were dead. They had committed suicide. In Chile, we had a female Nobel laureate, the poet Gabriela Mistral, but she looked like a man, and not a very handsome one. I didn't have a lot of role models. Once, a long time ago, I heard that stories are to humankind what dreams are to individuals. As individuals, if we are not allowed to dream, we go mad, we perish, suffocated by confusing thoughts, unspoken words, persevering demons. And without stories, humankind would have no collective memory, no understanding of civilization, no spiritual legacy. In stories, we share experience and we learn. Stories, dreams, more and more, this is what my life seems to be about. Stories are like dreams. They follow their own rules. The writer and the dreamer have much in common. They can't control the plot. They are always part of the story or the dream. They don't understand the symbols until much later. I have never known what my books are about until I see the movie or some critic points out what I was writing. I can't separate my life from my work. Both my work as a storyteller and my own life seem to be so tightly interwoven that I can hardly distinguish fiction from reality. I think that Freud has a name for this condition, but I can't remember it. I think that everything I write is true, and if it isn't true right now, it may be true tomorrow. Before I was called a liar, but now that I make a living with these lies, I'm called a narrator. For me, life becomes real when I write it. What I don't write is erased by the winds of oblivion. I forget a lot. I can't remember faces. My faces, dates, or places. My mind seems to betray me constantly. But I always remember a good story or a significant dream. Writing is a silent introspection, a journey into the dark caverns of memory and the soul. Fiction, like memory and dreams, moves from revelation to revelation. In Venezuela, I could not find a job as a journalist. For almost 7 years, I did all kinds of odd jobs to make a living. My marriage wasn't going too well either because my husband found a job in the middle of the jungle and I stayed in Caracas with the kids, so we were separated most of the time. For years, I felt that my life was a failure, that everything was like meaningless. And then something happened that would change my fate. On January 8th, 1981, we received a phone call in Caracas that my grandfather was dying in Chile. The old man was almost 100 years old. I had been brought up in his house. We were really very close. I could not go back to bid him farewell, so I started a letter, a sort of spiritual letter, that I knew that he would never read. Sure enough, he died a few weeks later, but I continued to write every night in the kitchen after my family went to bed. By the end of the year, I had 500 pages on the kitchen counter, and that didn't look like a letter anymore. I had written my first novel, The House of the Spirits. That book, I think, is an attempt to recover the world I had lost, to reunite the people that were scattered all over, to get back my family and my memories. The end of the book came to me in a dream. I had struggled with those pages for almost a month. I had written like 13 endings and nothing quite worked. But then one night I woke up like at 3 o'clock in the morning with a dream in which my grandfather was lying on his bed, all dressed in black, and the furniture was painted black. And I was also in mourning, sitting on a black chair, telling him about the book I had written. And when I woke up, that was the end of my book. So I ran to my little typewriter. There were no computers at the time. And in a few hours, I had my ending. And at the end of The House of the Spirits, the protagonist, Alba, is sitting in a room where her grandfather lays dead, and she's waiting for the morning to bury him while she writes the story.